Hi, my name is Srishti, and this is my New Ink deck walkthrough for my application. And I am based remotely, so I participate in New Ink pretty much virtually. And yeah, I'll just get started. So I applied to New Ink with a question and a problem that I had identified talking to several folks in the XR industry during my time as a researcher and a producer. And a lot of the feedback that we were getting and I was getting was that, there are these amazing works that are getting festival premieres, but they're not necessarily having a post-premiere strategy or structure in the similar way that film and television get, or mostly film at festivals get. And I started to think deeply about whether I could do something to help solve that problem, or at least address it in some way. And so, the second slide of my deck, I always like to talk about why I do the things I do, why I'm drawn to some of the problems that I like to address or think through or discuss with people. And with Algae, which is the name of the company that I started in order to address this, what we identified and what I identified pretty early on through conversations was that, something like XR can have a very cookie cutter solution around this is one way to do it, but it has to be super multi-dimensional, and essentially based in partnerships. So a lot of that comes from my own life experiences and how I grew up. I moved a lot growing up. I'm a classic third culture kid, child of change. We were moving every 2 years. I'd sort of been to 11 schools by the time I was 16, 3 countries by 21, and just kind of kept moving since. And I bring that up largely because one of the things I took away from that experience in my own life is how much collaboration matters and how much having conversations across contexts can actually elevate solutions that were underlooked or overlooked before. As I got deeper into, the distribution conversation, as well as some of the early development and production work that I do on the side and through my many ventures, I kind of understood that it's not unrelated. The social architecture track, the creative science track, the co-op studies track, and that's been the best, kind of most joyful surprise of joining, is just meeting folks from all the other tracks that I didn't even know or notice or even consider, because I think I was so in my lane about this idea in Algae. So I did apply with XR in mind, largely because I wanted to be in community with artists and I wanted to learn from them and talk to them and have deep conversations and learn, provide some kind of group conversations, so I wanted that. But also a thing that drew me to New Ink was that it's a community of incredibly diverse disciplines and disciplinary people, in the sense that you have folks who are artists as well as, filmmakers, lawyers, writers, community organizers, technicians. Like, it's incredible just how wonderfully hyphenated the community is. And I think from my own creative practice, and the second reason I was drawn was because it's hybrid. And given the essence of Algae, which is so dependent on relationships globally, I knew that ability to be in community with folks from genuinely everywhere, folks that are based in a lot of different places, was going to be invaluable. And it really has been. So those were the sort of two main things that drew me to New Ink. And ever since joining, obviously there's 20,000 others, but that's from this time last year. That was what really stood out. But the idea for Algae, or the word for Algae, quite frankly, came from a wall that I saw, which was painted lime green in a room. And it was a little jarring, very pre-Brat summer. I just want to say this was summer of 2023. I was in New York and saw this wall and kind of had this moment where I realized, oh, this is how XR must actually feel to people who have never done it before, which is that it's a familiar room, but it's this really bright color that represents vitality and newness, but it's also not familiar and it's strange and it's not a real space, but it is. And I started writing a lime green and then getting deeper into Algae, and I was like, I like the name Algae. And that's really where it was formed. But one of the things I wanted to say also in the deck was that the core of this idea and this offering of new vitality and new energy was to give it to folks that who typically wouldn't access such amazing artworks, right? Folks who don't go to museums or who wouldn't typically know what XR even means or stands for, or what VR necessarily represents, but rather could be curious about the content, the stories, the community relationships that these technologies offer. And so embedding audience and audience insight and touch points was incredibly important for me to include in the deck as a sort of core research question or exploration. And then I wanted to include this slide as well because I was honest about sort of the stage I was in with the distribution conversation. I'd been doing early development work with artists in the XR space. I'd been doing research, but there was a lot of missing gaps and still continues to be in my knowledge, and therefore really being able to state that I'm looking for investors and I'm talking to advisors and looking for advisors, as well as curious to learn from artists and venues and needing to know what legal and management infrastructures I need to have in order to make this happen. So having that in the deck, I remember doing it and thinking, is it too much to say what I need at this stage? But in fact, realizing that if I was going to develop this idea through New Ink, that it would be beneficial to do so. I find when I do applications, reflecting on my life experiences and career in a way that feels authentic to both my successes and failures always helps, because it shows you as a human being in the application and the ability to know that nothing is perfect and that you're going to always keep learning and growing and making mistakes and growing again. And showing that in practice is incredibly important, and I think the New Ink deck format actually allows for that. So if anyone is listening and is kind of wondering how to do that, I think being able to include that reflection, that reflective quality at least in there, was really useful. And then how else? I would say in the interview also, I remember, I was also in a place in my life where I really felt, and I still feel, oh my goodness, that I don't know that much, or that I feel very green and new. And I've gotten a lot of counter advice to that, saying, well, you should say you're confident, or you should pretend you're confident. And I think admitting you're new or green about certain things and having the confidence about skills in another is actually a sign of, curiosity. And I think sometimes in the tech space or in the startup space, there's a tendency to sort of be non-transparent about what founders are confident about. And I love that, I had space and there was space to just be like, this is what I don't know. I feel very new and I have so much to learn and I'm excited to learn, and that was celebrated. So I wanted to include that. And then my final slide for this presentation is one that just always makes me laugh and smile, because ultimately any creative idea has to have some enjoyment and fun. And I think in the process of unwinding and understanding algae, even as an aquatic organism and at its properties, I started to discover that it's one of the most overlooked sources of oxygen. And then it got me thinking, sort of, is there a way to build that into the organizational structure? So really prioritizing partnerships between historically underrepresented groups, building a team that looks where no one else is looking, really is willing to find solutions to problems, find new venues, experiment with different new ideas, and how a name could, or a color, or a context could help shape that. So that's including this and including my research through visual formats or meme, or all of the ways that I was identifying lime green in culture, whether that's close friends lists or FaceTime, and what that represents, I think, for our modern society. I felt like the New Ink deck format was really liberating because I'm so early stage in this idea. And it allowed me to tell a story of my work outside of just my work. So for example, my personal story, my why, my flow, the way that my career has led me to have these questions. And it also, I think, allowed me to ask those questions and pose those questions and say, here's a thesis I have. I want to explore if it actually is true, or it has any value, or it has any resonance with the industry and with artists and other people. And so I think when we do works done, or kind of here's a list of the stuff I've done, it's effective and very powerful, but the deck format and being able to get creative with showing who I am outside of just the work I've done was really liberating, at least for me. So that's the extent of my presentation, and I hope it helps anybody who's interested in applying. And yeah, that's me.